Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I introduce myself? I'm Azalia Naomi as the first speaker from opposition team. And I do not support this motion that stated this House believes that government should provide significant financial incentives for urban citizens to move to rural areas. So they say the government will provide them with funds to move to the rural areas, right? This is unnecessary because this is futile and only for the short term or temporary. The government should prioritize infrastructure development and companies first to ensure the livelihoods of the people there. Because if only people are prioritized, the sustainability of their lives is also cannot be guaranteed, and they will think twice about continuing to live in the rural areas. This is also supported by the fact that the majority of the population who will move to these areas are people facing financial problems. The financial issues here, are like high living costs in urban areas, limited job opportunities, and so on. By moving to rural areas where there are no job prospects or definite job opportunities, their lives in rural areas will be the same as their lives in urban areas. And therefore, the government's goal of helping the society cannot be achieved. And they also say that people go where money goes. And that is true. But if that mindset is allowed to be persist, it can have negative consequences for both society and the government. Okay, let me make it clear. The government's role here should not be limited to just providing funds for people to move to the rural areas. Beyond that, the government are also responsible for ensuring adequate infrastructure and creating sustainable job opportunities in those areas. If the money provided by the government runs out, it may indicate that this approach may not be effective in the long run. And as I mentioned earlier, without sufficient job prospect, the livelihood of the community cannot be guaranteed. And therefore, the government should take more comprehensive steps to develop rural areas, such as improving access to education and training, expanding infrastructure to support agriculture or local industry, and encouraging investment from the private sector. And this way, people or society will see that there's a value of living in this area, in these rural areas, and will be more motivated to stay and contribute to the local development or the government's plan. And now I will move on and will elaborate more why I do not support this motion. So first, the government will provide assistance in the form of money for people to move to rural areas. What needs to be emphasized here is that the government only gives the money, and so what? Can money guarantee that their lives in rural areas can go well? And without clear direction or guidance from the government, it can trigger a new problems. And this is the same as the government washing its hand and letting people live in new areas that are not guaranteed. And with the money provided by the government, if the community is unable to utilize it effectively, it will undoubtedly foster a dependency mindset. Live in urban and rural areas is certainly contrasting, and surely some members of the community are not accustomed to rural life. Therefore, they must adapt first. The government should provide socialization or guidance for the community who will reside in rural areas instead of just giving them money. And I will give you an example or illustration. So if people accustomed to urban living suddenly have to move to rural areas due to economic problems, they may find it challenging to adapt to the minimal facilities compared to urban areas. Additionally, due to inadequate infrastructure and lack of promising job prospect, they may choose to use the money provided by the government first. And if this situation continues, it will lead to the government fund being depleted. And so what? What will they do after that? They have no other choice, and they may either stay in the rural areas and spend their remaining years there, or they may just choose to return to urban areas and face all the economic problems there. And if this happens, then what is the government's point in relocating people to rural areas? This cannot be sustained in the long run. or just temporarily. And best case that can happen here, firstly, if the government directs the community rather than simply letting them be just natural and just being free on the rural area, people's lives in the rural area will be more secure and they will continue to reside in rural areas in the long term. They will have a better understanding of how to find promising job prospects and will also be more knowledgeable about the condition or situation in the rural areas. Second, if the government prioritizes infrastructure development and business or company over relocating communities or society, rural areas can gradually develop and advance life like urban areas. With this approach, the government's goal of achieving equitable development can also be realized. Worst case that can happen here is, if this continues, the government's goal of helping the community with its economic issue will not be achieved. And because people will have the same life as they did when they were in the urban life, right? With only money that the government gave and no good infrastructure and no promising job prospect, how will they meet their material or financial need? So it will be the same as they live in the city than they live in the rural areas. And that is why, as the first speaker of opposition, I strongly do not support this motion. Thank you.